Welcome to this week's Bitshares DEV Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all Bitshares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the Bitshares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Would you like to get started with any updates, Bytemaster?
We are continuing to move forward. Our development team is growing as we're bringing in more people into the core development group. So SVK, Kronos, have been working with Valentine and James on the new wallet update, user interface, trading interface. So we're getting more manpower behind the user interface side of things. Just wanted to throw that out there. Really excited to be working with these great people. There's been a lot of discussion this past week about bit assets and also about the DPoS2 model with delegates and workers and how we would transition from one to the other. We are preparing to make an announcement with lots of details, and the reason why we're not just telling you what we know right now is we want the announcement to have all the questions answered in one place at a time rather than having bits and pieces leaked out over time that confuse people. Now, people who have been following Mumble sessions or the forum, you have a pretty good idea of some of the big things. Obviously, it's not everything that's going on. So some people have been contacting me, asking me about API changes and how that's going to impact them in community review. I want to let everyone know right now that the announcement is not going to be an immediate hard fork or any such thing. It's going to define the roadmap going forward for an eventual hard fork with new features, but every single person from the community will have an opportunity to comment and critique what we produce in the announcement. We are not dictators. We're not trying to dictate things. What we are trying to do is merely provide a unified opinion of the developers rather than discussing it all in public. And once we have, this is the opinion, this is what the developers, our best guess at what we think we need to do for Bitshares, we're going to present that in the announcement. And then we're going to take community feedback and tweak at things. So if there's anything that we are suggesting that is too far out there, or we misjudge the market's acceptance, or there will be a review time where we can actually get that feedback and we will incorporate it. So I want to emphasize that we are not going to be making a tutorial change, and we are specifically trying to move to a system where all hard forks and code changes are only adopted upon shareholder approval.
Level of shareholder approval and what metrics are you going to be using, or do you know yet?
That has been one of the topics we've been discussing, and we have several different strategies on that. The most basic level is to have all hard forks hinge on worker approval. And so there's two types of hard forks. Ones that are funded, right? So someone proposes a feature for a worker. They say it's going to cost, this much and take this much time. And if it gets funded, then it should be implemented, and the hard fork should occur on the date specified by the project if the worker is still in on that date. If they're still getting paid and they haven't been voted out, then that hard fork will take effect. So that's one type of way of triggering a hard fork. Another way of triggering a hard fork is to have the hard fork take effect if a worker that takes no pay gets enough approval to be, either 51% of the witnesses or, the top witness slot. So the active votes need to actively approve it. And in theory, we know that 51% of the witnesses have the ability to hard fork on their own if they wanted to. So I was thinking that makes a reasonable threshold for the witnesses to hard fork. The goal is that the witnesses should be completely neutral to hard forking, and that it's the stakeholders that trigger all hard forks with their explicit voting. This protects the witnesses because they're not making the decision. They might load the code and say, yes, I'll switch this way if you vote it, but if not, the older will stay. So the witnesses do have to upgrade, so they have to vote first by saying, yes, I'm running software that's capable of doing this hard fork.
Did you just get picked up by an alien?
Stan just got carried away.
Oh, poor Stan. I figured something like this was going to happen. At least we caught it on air.
Yes, as he quickly leaves the room.
This is Kronos. Quick question. You mentioned using workers as voting, basically saying if this worker gets voted in, then that indicates the shareholder will execute a hard fork. Does that mean that opening a worker role will no longer have the 2-week fee in terms of delegate pay that today's delegates do? Because if that fee still is there, then it would be rather costly to put forward a motion.
Fees are something that will have to be discussed by the community and set by the users. 1 second, the aliens are trying to return Stan and he's locked out.
Well, at least he's coming back. God only knows what they've been doing with him.
He's been implanted with a mining chip.
Has this happened before?
All right, so yeah, fees are a separate issue. I don't think that a worker should have to pay those type of fees. They're going to have a high enough threshold to get elected. That
I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
So if a worker has their whole worker proposal is pay me X amount, I'll implement the feature, test the feature, completely build the feature. That worker is getting paid to implement the hard fork. There is no sense in electing a worker, paying them, and then not adopting the hard fork they produced. So that's kind of a pre-approved hard fork. In that case, the developer would code the hard fork to take effect on a particular date. And if the worker is still elected on that date, then it's up to the shareholders to vote out if they don't want the hard fork that he's, the threshold is getting him paid, and then it happens. If the shareholders aren't paying him, right, and someone comes out of the blue and completely self-funds the development of a new feature, and they want to get it in, then the threshold that I would recommend is the witness level threshold, but they could also trigger it. Whoever creates the hard fork code can select when the change takes effect. And the witnesses are the ones that have to approve of the trigger mechanism when they adopt the code with that trigger mechanism in it. And I think that it's going to vary. Some hard forks might say it's a bug fix hard fork, might be triggered only on the delegate's approval of the hard fork, which means the shareholders have to explicitly vote out the delegates in order to avoid the hard fork. That would be for a non-controversial hard fork to fix a bug or to fix a security hole. If it's a major new feature, there's different thresholds, and each hard fork will probably have a different threshold depending upon its significance. An emergency patch to fix something that could create money or something like that would certainly be something that the witnesses would just roll out on their own. That's not changing the social contract represented by the intent of the code. Right? Because, we always have a saying as programmers, the computer should do what I mean, not what I say. But unfortunately, it always does exactly what we say. And sometimes what we say is not what we mean. So as a community, we have an idea of what we mean the blockchain to do. And the code is supposed to express that. And if it doesn't express that, then, I think it's up to the witnesses to take action to correct things that are a complete violation of the intent, such as, here's a bug and it ended up, someone lost money or someone created shares or something. Those type of things need to be dealt with quickly to protect everyone. But anything that is not urgent, so if it's, even if it's somewhat cosmetic, should depend upon the shareholders taking action directly. And that is primarily to protect the developers who are no longer the ones that are managing or directing the future of the blockchain. They are merely making proposals. Here's a set of code. Do you approve it? The shareholders, the stakeholders are the ones that are in direct control over the rules. That protects everyone, the developers, the witnesses, the delegates, and the workers. And so that's what we as developers are going to do to protect ourselves. And I think that that's probably going to be acceptable to everyone.
In terms of, there are delegates that have just recently been registered. And this was before they knew about any of these changes. So for them, what do you see being the workaround, or is there going to be anything that will help them recompense the fees that they've paid, or is that just kind of the luck of the draw?
You're talking about the delegate fees that people pay to create a delegate if those rules go away?
Yeah.
All delegate positions will be migrated to an equivalent position in the new system. If you have a 100% paid delegate, there would be a worker that requests the pay of 50 BTS per block for life. And if that worker stays in, then recoup things under the exact same terms as before. There have been a lot of questions about how we were going to migrate workers and the 101 delegates forward. And we're going to give everyone with a delegate account today a witness account, and the default witness pay will be what they're currently making today with 3%. So 3% of 50 BTS per block be the default witness pay, and anyone who has more than the 3% pay rate will also get a worker, and that worker will get the delta between 3% and 97%, or 97% of 50 BTS per block is what the worker will get. And they will both receive the same number of votes that they currently have today. Not all of today's delegates will want to migrate to be both a witness and a delegate. So we are contemplating options for users, for delegates to express how they would like their position migrated. If you want to just be a worker and you don't want to run a node anymore, you can opt out. If you just want to run a node and you don't want to, then you can just be a witness. As far as, we have delegates today, and tomorrow the delegates are just going to be the council of people that are debating changes to blockchain parameters. Initially, that council of people will be core devs. That's a role that does not exist in Bitshares today. It does exist in the sense that the core devs have been the ones that have been setting those properties. And then once the blockchain's released, then everything can, everyone can vote to change who those people are. If you don't want us setting those parameters anymore and you want someone else to do it, go ahead. So, does that answer your questions?
The new delegate positions, I know that the witness positions are going to be a set pay rate, and obviously the workers are asking for their own pay rates. Are the delegate positions actually going to be like similar to the witnesses, where there's a stipend that's paid to them, or are they going to be unpaid positions?
They're going to be unpaid positions because, generally speaking, the only time they have to do something is when it comes time to approve or discuss the change to the protocol. We don't want them to be paid because it should not be a lot of work. You don't have to run any nodes. You don't have any recurring costs. And they are honorary positions, and they're positions of trust. And just having that position should be valuable enough in its own right.
Does that answer your question, Crypto?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
It sounds to me like we're going to have ample opportunity to converse about this as an entire community and really dig into the details and flesh them out together. And then we'll come up with the final solution together, as opposed to having it just explained to us as though this is going to be the end result and we have no say in the process. So I appreciate that. I think that's something that we have learned, that you guys have learned at least, is going to probably be the better way of going about doing things. And of course, these are things that, a lot of this stuff is very new. So we're learning some of these things the hard way sometimes, and it's hard to build the first road. It's easier to repave it afterwards, right?
I'd like to take a little bit of time to discuss bit assets some more.
Sure.
Because this seems to be a highly debated point, and I don't think we can discuss it too much. It's an area that even someone like me, who's been living and breathing this stuff for 2 years, is still covering new insights and nuances in how it behaves in the market. So I want to introduce a concept here that you can either peg 1 bit USD to $1, or you can peg 100,000 bit USD to $100,000. But you can't do both in the bit USD to Bitshares market.
Can you explain that a little bit further?
Sure. If I have $100,000 worth of Bitshares and I tried to sell it right now, it would push the price down 10% or maybe 30%, which means that if that 100,000 bit USD was really going to be pegged to $100,000, it would have to be at a price that is 20% lower than it is today. I don't know what the actual order books look like, but we all know that you can have vastly different order books that have the exact same price. And you can either have a buy wall or a sell wall, and then you can have this long tail, so that at any given volume there is a different spread, is what it comes down to. And that the price feed is almost always based upon the spread, smallest spread for an infinitesimal amount of Bitshares. $1 worth of Bitshares is the only thing you can get at the price feed on various exchanges. And you have to, if you want to buy or sell larger quantities, the spread or the slippage increases. So any attempt, if you try to make, as a merchant, if I'm going to accept BitUSD as payment for a house, right? Got a $100,000 house or even a car, and I want to accept BitUSD as payment without any discount. I need to know that I can sell that BitUSD and end up with, $50,000 or $100,000 in my bank account without any fear, without even having to check the market. If you have it tracking the exact $1 amount, then all the merchants, anyone who's doing any volume of any significant size is going to say, oh yes, I see that I can sell $1 worth at that, but I can't sell more. So that's the issue we have, and I think that from now on, whenever we discuss a price feed, it's a two-dimensional term. You have a price and a quantity, and you have a different price feed for any different level of quantity that you're trading. And as a community, we need to figure out what level of quantity makes sense in order to have a currency, have BitUSD be used as a dollar versus being used as, all right, I accept BitUSD at 98% or 95% of face value. So that's one thing, is every time we discuss price feed, we always have to have a quantity. And historically, the quantity we have all been referring to is 1 cent or $1, right? That's the price feed. It's the smallest, lowest volume point in the order book. So that's one thing to consider. And then you have to consider the fact that the range in the BitUSD to BTS market is going to be highly dependent on Bitshares. Bitshares is not something that we know what it's worth, and its price is changing with high volatility every single day. And that means that you can only get so close that there's always going to be slippage, and there's always going to be a widespread, any significant amount of volume, because the market doesn't know how to do it. Even Bitcoin, if you try to sell a large amount of Bitcoin, there's slippage and your spread increases. So when we're designing these bit assets for use as a currency, we definitely need to have a higher volume than $1 as the basis of the price feed. In general, if all the exchanges publish their order books, I would say the feed producer should walk the book down by some amount and use that as the actual price for the price feed, rather than the just a $1 price.
I want to get to the heart of what you're talking about here, because you're really talking about a lot of detailed stuff here. So are you saying basically you're interested in seeing what our opinions are regarding how we can ensure in a low liquidity market that the peg is pretty strong, even in that situation, strong enough for somebody who wants to make a big purchase and liquidate 100,000 BitUSD worth of BitUSD or Bitshares into to buy a house, for instance, that won't drop the peg to an amount that's too significant to say that the peg is holding?
My point is that the value of an asset, if I have 100 or 1 billion Bitshares, I cannot honestly tell myself that I've got $5 million.
Sure.
Right? I know that if I sold my billion Bitshares, I would be lucky to end up with $1 million. Right?
Sure.
So price and quantity always go hand in hand, and we need to remember that. So when we are setting a peg, we need to say, this is the peg for this quantity. It can be a quantity per day. Any given day you can sell this much. And as long as I'm selling less than the daily trading volume, a small fraction of the daily trading volume, I can get, pretty close to the spot price. But if I'm trying to do more than that, I've got to discount it based upon its liquidity.
Is there a way of saying a percentage of the volume at a specific snapshot in time, and there could be a way of monitoring that, or something to that effect, where it says, at this point in time, liquidity is, we have $1 million liquidity right now, so 10% you can set, we can in total sell 10% at this much.
Right. So it comes down to this: how is the market going to value BitUSD? And it's going to value it based on two things: what is the value of the collateral backing it, and what is the liquidity of the collateral backing it. But there's another thing I was about to get into, and that is the BitUSD versus USD market. This particular market is very different than the Bitshares versus BitUSD market, because both sides are relatively less volatile. Relative to each other, there's some offset, but it's not changing very often, or it's changing at a much slower pace, which means that the difference between $1 for 1 bit USD and $100,000 for 100,000 bit USD will be much less than the same comparison in quantity Bitshares market, and that's just because Bitshares is volatile, and we can't guarantee the same thing in the Bitshares versus bit USD market. And what we're trying to do here is take a volatile asset and combine it with a price feed and create an asset that is worth $1. And we can't peg it in the bit USD versus Bitshares market. It needs to be in the bit USD versus USD market. And in theory, you could create a closed loop where you adjust the price feed to find whatever price feed causes the bit USD market to be $1. And that price feed can allow forced settlement at that price feed at any time by anyone who has bit USD for BTS. And it's just a matter of figuring out, increasing it and lowering it until you hit it. It's kind of like adjusting interest rates, but the fact of the matter is this. From a trader's perspective, the only thing you care about when you're trading bit USD versus Bitshares is the correlation to the dollar. Is bit USD highly correlated to the dollar? And the more correlated it is to the dollar, it could be a dollar substitute. For example, there's no problem with it always being worth 3.14 bit USD to USD. All right, say we managed to achieve a perfect peg at that ratio. The market would function just fine, and people would accept it as a dollar replacement. Sure, it's an odd amount, but whatever, the peg's working fine, and traders can trade it as if it was $1. It just happens to be $3. All right, that's the unit, that's the size of the bucket I'm using.
But the key is ensuring that peg holds. So I guess something that this brings to mind for me is back a while ago, we talked about the potential to have a basket of assets, of bit assets, like a kind of like a bit CPI index or something to that effect, that would be extremely stable and would accommodate, for instance, like it would hold something like gold, silver, oil, and bit USD and some others.
You can't have different collateral because it makes the assets non-fungible. But you could create an asset that tracks any price feed. So the key is this: a bit asset is a prediction market. The price feed is what the parties are predicting upon, right? So if you have forced settlement at a price feed, the market will establish a price based upon predicting where that price feed is going to move and the willingness of one side to accept forced settlement and the other side to demand forced settlement. That's going to be some price that's above the price feed. If the price feed is perfectly correlated to the real-time price of dollar versus Bitshares, then the asset will also be perfectly correlated, and is going to be completely market-based pricing. And in theory, there will never be a forced settlement exercised, because the shorts don't want to be forced settled, and the longs, they might like that the forced settlement's there as a backstop, but they also don't want to be having to rely on that forced settlement. They want to know that the market is setting the price and not someone else. So everyone in the market is predicting where the price feed's going to go, and the resultant price will thus be perfectly correlated, and the market participants will completely trade. That makes it a perfectly viable dollar substitute for traders and speculators. So the only problem that's left to be solved is trying to get the bit USD to USD exchange rate close enough to $1 that people accept it at face value, so that it can be used as a currency in addition to being a speculative or hedging option. And that's the only reason for price parity, is that I owe you $1 here, let me give you a bit USD, and we both consider it fair. And I think that we can get close enough to that by just having a price feed that tracks the real-time price with forced settlement. If you want to adjust it down a little bit so that the feed producers have all the power in their hands to cause the trading value of BitUSD to be wherever they want it to be, including perfectly pegged. And it doesn't matter as long if the feed producers can either be active and carefully monitoring the exchange rate, or they can be passive and allow the market to adjust the premium. And there may be do long-term adjustments based upon removing the long-term base to get it closer to $1. But in general, I have extreme confidence in the new bid asset system to be perfectly viable. The peg doesn't break as long as the collateral is good. End of story. And traders will trade as long as they know what they're trading on. And if they're trading on a prediction market on the price feed, great. The market will provide the liquidity and people will be able to trade it as a dollar substitute. Those are the only two things we need. And then privatized bid assets means that we don't have to get the parameters right. There are enough variables to tune between adjusting the feed or adjusting the fee or adjusting the delay in holding period for the market to discover it does work best. What do traders want and what do currency users want? And I think there's a disconnect between the two groups. Traders want one thing, currency users want another, and a hybrid might be ideal. It might be that the two groups are completely different demands. Currency users want it to last forever. Speculators need to know an end date where they're forced to settle. But with privatized bid assets, we can allow the market to explore both. And once the magic formula is discovered, the delegates and the witnesses and the shareholders can start using that formula for the blockchain provided assets. But I think that's where we are on the bid asset front. And I just want to make sure that the community understands all the different variables that are both tunable and that the price feed needs to have a quantity.
So it sounds to me like basically what you're saying is you have many ideas on how to accomplish this, but you'd rather open it up to the free market for people to come in and come up with their own ways. And the free market will gravitate toward the best solution, which might be the original BitUSD, but it might not.
That is correct. One thing I would like to add is that as things have been changing, the original BitUSD model can be approximated by a privatized bid asset, but it will not be explicitly supported.
Little J asks here, what about the current BitUSD? How will these expired shorts settle?
Expired shorts don't need to settle. If they wanted to settle, they can buy BitUSD at a premium and close out their position. They are only honoring their contract of... The current system is working very similar to having forced settlement at the price feed, right? The shorts don't want to be settled, but in theory, anyone with BitUSD right now can force settle any of these expired shorts. So you can view the current bid asset system as you can force settle with 30-day notice. So you buy BitUSD, you can always exit at the price feed within 30 days by doing a forced settlement. So the current system is really not much different other than how we're thinking about things and the fact that we're allowing it to be, rather than being 30 days from the time the short opens their position, it's 30 days from the time the BitUSD holder requests for settlement. That's the only difference in terms of structure of the market, which means that you can simulate the current market with the new structure and just have the 30-day waiting period be on the longs to initiate rather than on the shorts to be forced to roll over. So once you start making these analogies between the two different systems and you realize that they're not really that different in terms of what can be expressed, we don't have a problem in the current system. The shorts are providing liquidity. We have the best liquidity we've ever had at the price feed. It's never been, BitUSD has never been more worth $1 worth of Bitshares, and that's good. We have a situation right now where not many people are looking to short, but guess what? With the recent turns in the market and the positive developments, going on in the BitShares ecosystem, demand for short is going to increase. Anyone who really wants the price stability, well, they'll bid it up. And BitUSD will be bid up to a price that's reflective of the demand for price stability versus the demand for shorting. And that's it. That's where it's always going to be.
Does that answer your question, Lil J? I'm going to go ahead and assume that's a yes. Oh, if the owner doesn't have enough spare BTS to buy to cover, is that a question or a statement? You
can adjust the call price upward to take a mark. And if you set the call price to be above the current price feed, then it basically turns your collateral into a market order. So if you don't have enough BTS to cover, you can use your collateral to cover with a market order.
Well, with that said, I'd like to get moving on to one of the next questions, if you don't mind, and that is, my clients need the tools necessary to build successful globally distributed companies, much more than just user-issued assets, on our blockchain, where each paid worker is held accountable and rewarded. What features, like blockchain human resources, HR, will the next version include, other than voting, to actually hold workers accountable and directly reward the provably hardest workers? Are you aware of anything going on in the background, Bytemaster, regarding this?
I want to start out by saying that voting is the single most expensive operation to account for. It's one of the reasons why Bitshares has performance issues today, and while we've restructured things to make it more efficient, voting is still computationally intensive, because in order to calculate the vote, there's two ways to do it. One is to calculate votes real time, and the other is to do it periodic batch mode. When you do it in batch mode, it's the most efficient, but it can take, even if everything's in memory, just going through a list of 1 million accounts, totaling up the votes and tallying them up and tracking them can take a very long time. And if you're trying to achieve fast block intervals, you have a maximum amount of computation that can be done per block or per transaction. Otherwise, you have to spread it out.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Ken Code is asking, he says here, other than voting, we know voting sucks right now. What is your thought on that?
My point is that the blockchain, I have no intention of allowing the blockchain to track votes for user-issued assets. Or if you wanted to have a DAC on the DAC. If you wanted to take the code base and create an entirely new blockchain protocol that is its own DAC, that's a completely different question, and one that whoever is doing that, they can do whatever they want. We have no intention of implementing features for any other blockchain other than Bitshares. If Bitshares doesn't use the feature, then okay. If there is demand for HR type functionality in Bitshares, more finer grained than what we're offering with the worker program, then the way that would work out is someone would write a spec, create a worker, pay for the worker, get a hard fork, and now Bitshares will support it, and then in theory anyone who uses the Bitshares code base would have access to that feature as well. But if we can't, we want Bitshares to be the unified DAC, and I guess if you wanted to hire developers, you could build something on your own, and that's fine. But all the developers that are being paid today are going to be working for whoever's paying them, basically.
Ken Code here is asking, not even one of my 10 points.
Now, you haven't said your 10 points on this mumble session. Can you pick your most top 2 features that you'd like?
Let's pick one. I would like to cover I have a clip that I'd like to play and see what your thoughts are on it, BM, because it was mentioned on Let's Talk Bitcoin, and I felt like they mentioned Bitshares in the clip, and it was something that I felt it might be a good idea to get your response on it, if that's possible.
Play away.
You know, Ripple is very attractive to banks because it's just like a tokenized IOU system. So you can create any type of IOU in that you want. And again, that means that gateways that take in dollars and put out cryptocurrency, right, and give you cryptocurrency, can create their own assets that then they will redeem for dollars. So again, like if I am an exchange and Stephanie, you are also an exchange and we are different exchanges, then I would issue Adam dollars, you would issue Stephanie dollars, and you would control Stephanie dollars. And when people bring Stephanie dollars to you, you would accept them at whatever rate you set, and you would, wire transfer to them whatever type of money.
This is way more power than I'm comfortable with.
I know, right? It's a lot of power, but it's a real responsibility because, again, as a company doing this, if you're doing it legally in the United States with United States customers, you have to have licenses, you have to be regulated. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. So it's not just like anybody can do this. So what groups like Ripple and Bitshares have done is to make it so that when you create one of these assets, you have the ability to essentially tick a setting that makes it so that you can freeze what people do with your assets if things go haywire. So the obvious scenario is somebody breaks into somebody's wallet and steals 100,000 Atom bucks. Technically, those are fungible, right? I can't tell the difference between those and anybody else's Atom bucks. But in a system where I have this ability, I can choose to freeze the entire currency and make it so everybody who has the currency cannot send it to anybody but me as the issuer, right? So I can refund them, but I can't send it to you. Or the other option is that they can pick one individual person, one individual account that they identify as a malicious account and freeze just that one. If I have Atom bucks in my account and I also have Stephanie bucks in my account, and you freeze Stephanie bucks, I can still use the Atom bucks in my account, but I can't use the Stephanie bucks anymore.
Right.
From completely disruptive to completely PayPal of the banks in 3 years.
So he says congratulations there, and then they get into why Bitcoin is decentralized and basically cannot have this. This cannot happen with them. But they mentioned Bitshares in there with Ripple, which was very interesting to me. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on it.
My thoughts are, he described it perfectly. And the only problem people have is, we need assets that can trade on a blockchain so that we don't have centralized exchanges. Every single time someone transfers their money to a centralized exchange, they're creating Atom bucks or Gox bucks or Bitfinex bucks. It's no different. All we're doing is we're having the exchange put their assets on the blockchain ledger, and once they're on a blockchain, that means their assets can be used in smart contracts. Whereas when they're on their ledger, there's a lot more restrictions on, if they're in an exchange's database, you can only do what that exchange will allow. If you put it on the blockchain, you can do anything the blockchain will allow. It's given people the freedom to do both. And the Bitcoin purists out there who say, well, we're not going to allow anything that has those features to even exist on the same protocol, is cutting off your network effect. It's cutting off your ability to integrate, and you're denying people a lot of value that they could have. I think that the mistake they make is to conflate a user-issued asset with the core asset. And I think that's the difference between Bitshares and Ripple. Ripple actually froze XRP for some users. But Bitshares, you can never freeze your Bitshares. And in that sense, Bitshares is like Bitcoin, and the user-issued assets are like assets issued on counterparty. You wouldn't blame Bitcoin for counterparty allowing the issuers to freeze the asset. Same thing. You don't blame Bitshares, because Bitshares, the token, is still perfectly usable even if you have user-issued assets. And what he didn't mention was that Bitshares offers another option, which is the market-issued asset, which gives you all the price stability of these IOUs without the restriction, without having an issuer that has to comply with these laws or hold the funds. So Bitshares gives an option, and he didn't describe that option. So at most it was an omission, but what he described was perfectly accurate.
What really struck me was the implication of, and I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, and that's kind of beside the point. But I did notice at first I was kind of heated up, and then I got thinking about it, and it really, I felt that this was something that you should have the opportunity, or at least our community should have the opportunity to have a say or to respond to this, because the implication to many potential people who listen to Let's Talk Bitcoin would be that Bitcoin is far better than Bitshares in terms of decentralization of power and everything. But really what it comes down to, in my mind, is directly like what you said about anybody who's using the current centralized exchanges is dealing with this problem right now. They are giving these exchanges control over whether they're going to have these assets or not. If you look at Polynex, for instance, they just came out and said we have to adhere to KYC laws, and you have to register all your personal information with us to be in compliance for you to be able to withdraw your tokens. So it was just a very interesting thing that I wished that they would have given us the opportunity to kind of, because right now with what's going on with Ripple, it's not really very bright for Bitshares to put us in there with Ripple, because I didn't think that was really fair.
I thought that was perfectly fair. They were comparing a feature of Bitshares to the entirety of Ripple, which makes us much bigger than Ripple. The fact of the matter is that when I talk to major banks and they tell me about their efforts to integrate with, what I hear is they're not interested in Bitcoin at all. Bitcoin does not work for them. It doesn't work for them for settlement between banks. It doesn't work for them to integrate with them. But they do want to integrate with crypto. They want to take advantages of crypto technology. So you can hold your Bitcoin and not integrate. But if you want to integrate and play, you need to have a more robust feature set than what Bitcoin supports. And we discussed this last week. I am about finding free market solutions for securing our life, liberty, and property. And that means that we need to have free market solutions that give us price stability. We need free market solutions that give us privacy. We need free market solutions that give us identity. And that those three things we need to have solutions for, and we just can't say, well, sorry, it's impossible, we're not going to do it, or sorry, you don't have any privacy, everything has to be public, or sorry, no identity, everything has to be anonymous. Because the fact of the matter is, if anonymous currencies were the only option in the market, then there's other problems that come about with kidnapping and ransoms, and those scenarios. The free market needs to have a solution, and I want to have solutions that don't involve force, that don't allow you to be coerced, and where there is no single person that can leverage you on your financial. You need financial freedom, and part of that freedom incorporates all these things. So when you rail against Ripple or not you, but when people rail about our platforms having the option of having these features, you're denying the need to have those in a free market. And so it's not the know your customer process or the whitelisting process or even the ability to freeze accounts that's the issue. It's not even companies that are the issue, or even international companies that are the issue. The issue are governments that can use coercion to compel these companies to do things that they wouldn't do in a free market. So I think a lot of companies in a free market, the market would probably settle around some reasonable know your customer requirements, because that's where all the money would be, that's where people will feel most safe. But companies are also balance that with privacy. It'd be like Swiss banks, where you don't get to see who owns what and all that stuff, but you can trust the bank because they're competing against each other. But as soon as you have governments coming in and coercing these companies, it's a completely different ballgame. It's no longer free market competition, right? In the free market, you can trust people because trust is a valuable commodity. And big companies are almost entirely, their value is in their trust. You buy from Apple because of their brand, and that brand is all about the trust that they've earned. Likewise, that applies to everything, even finances. And no big company is going to burn their trust in order to cheat one customer or two customers.
That's as long as there is a low barrier to entry for competitors, right?
Yeah, so it's all about the barrier to entry for competitors. And right now, governments and their regulations, they create high barriers to entry, which the higher the barrier to entry, the more the companies that are in these positions can abuse their power because they've already got it. But the lower the barrier to entry, the more balanced the free market becomes. So I think it's very bad to adopt a mindset that says all these different things are just absolutely wrong and that we need complete privacy. People want privacy and anonymity because they're afraid of the government. And companies doing that is not an issue. A blockchain that supports private entities doing that is not an issue. And fact of the matter is, a chain that allows private individuals to self-organize, to self-police without coercion is a tougher target for governments to attack than something like Bitcoin, where all they have to do is say, think of the children, and now all of a sudden Bitcoin just outlawed or has negative PR. And you need to maintain a balance of these things to get wide acceptance, and wide acceptance is necessary for us to actually have any freedom with cryptocurrency.
So the irony that I see here, and this is a trap that I personally actually fall into a little bit here, is that, you know, when I listened to Andreas in this, he was mentioning, you know, how good, congratulations, you've basically just ruined everything we've done. But it's interesting, the implication actually is that we're closing down options by thinking that way, as opposed, and that in its own way is closing the free market. So it's another form of force, and it's in that mindset. If Bitcoin and Counterparty take that route, they're closing off that avenue, which is actually taking away freedom, which is really interesting to me. And it's kind of mind-blowing to me because this is something that I should personally have been aware of myself. And I'm glad that I brought this up today. And thank you for your opinions and thoughts on it.
You know, there's also this other idea that so many of us here are inclined to lean more towards the, well, let's figure out how to do this aside and apart from the existing. You know, we see so much corruption in the existing legal frameworks that exist in all these different countries. But the truth is, this could be so much more of a powerful tool and so much more of a disruptive tool if we actually have the option built in to comply with you know, all the existing legal framework. This is going to allow, you know, a lot more capital to come in, a lot more players that, you know, wouldn't be inclined to you know, do things under the radar, and you know, it's interesting that we might end up usurping from within rather than coming from without. And
as long as there's choice, as long as choice is always on the table, and you don't have to be identified, and that will allow the coexistence of all interests involved. So that's what we need to strive for. And can that be achieved? I don't know. I'm optimistic it can be, but I have a lot of reservations about it.
Well, that comes down to humanity and us just making those decisions, and I think educating each other, really.
Well, there's always going to be blockchains that give you freedom and that don't require that, so long as there's freedom of speech. And obviously, Bitshares, the core token BTS, is going to be that way. And the bit assets that are on Bitshares are going to be that way. But I think there's no reason to fear or to exclude those who do the others. And I think that bringing them onto our platform gives users of our platform who want the privacy or want the not having to reveal their identity, the option to trade their free assets against the restricted assets. And that option gives the free assets more value versus not having the option. So I don't want to get into a mode of compelling users into a restricted asset. And I think free asset and free trade needs to be preserved as an option. I certainly don't want to do anything that contributes to enslaving mankind. I would say that the fear that those have against Ripple is if Ripple becomes dominant is we're right back where we are today with governments controlling access to funds just can have an account. Right? They can cut you off financially by blacklisting you with the banks. And if that becomes dominant, then where are we? Well, we need to, a new system has to be bootstrapped. And you have to acquire the network effect all over again. But I think that's just going to be the nature of society. As one country evolves to tyranny, a new country has to start up and there's a revolution. And if eventually people lose sight of it and you have to do it over and over and over again until we figure out a way to maintain freedom and prevent it from turning in there. So people are reacting to this, oh gosh, if Ripple gains this ground, everything's going to be know your customer, and then we've lost, if Ripple replaces Bitcoin, then we've lost everything. But I don't think Ripple's going to replace Bitcoin. I think there's always going to be a remnant. Those of us that are seeking freedom that will have a system for ourselves. And we might always be relegated to this small minority network that has maybe 1 or 2% of the population. But at least we'll have our network. It might not be global, but we have that freedom with our own people. And I think that's that option will always be there.
The point that you bring up opens up a whole new can of worms that we could cover in terms of, if we're a minority population, then of course we could be deemed crypto terrorists. But I don't want to get into that because we're over right now. But it is very interesting, and I'm glad to see that. I think actually with this you've adhered to your principles, and I've kind of learned a little bit more about my own today. So thank you for that on my end.
One last question, if I can, and that is, I apologize for coming in and out today because I've had some interruptions here, power failures, etc. But could you give us a quick synopsis or a rough estimate, Bytemaster, of when you see a discussion happening about the delegate transitioning details?
Probably shortly after the announcement, where we release all the answers to every question that we have, open community review. When we make this announcement, it's not going to be the absolute law, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be a well-structured, detailed, explained proposal for what we'd like to do. And then if we miss something or you don't like what we're proposing, we can have the ability to change it before any changes take effect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you everyone for attending another Hangout.